I shall do that. So hopefully everyone can hear me without me shouting too much. So
Project your voice.
all right. So if for those of you that I haven't met, my name is Megan Schiebe, and I host an online radio show, and we're taping this. And I actually met Aklilu through Paul a couple of weeks ago, and Paul's like really good at getting people to connect with each other. And he's like, hey Megan, you've got to meet Aklilu. He's from Ethiopia, he does some really cool development projects. He works on some really great development projects in Ethiopia. So, chat with him and tell me a little bit more about your radio show and so forth. And we actually, I think we hooked up a couple of weeks ago and just chatting about your organization, the non-profit, and we did a video shoot, which Paul did.
Right.
Still waiting to see that, okay. We did a video shoot and it was great just to, kind of network and see who is working on which kinds of initiatives in Austin, and especially great meeting with people like Aklilu, who's bringing people together, bringing great minds together, bringing elements like fifth element. Fifth mind. Close, so close.
Fifth Element's the movie on which this is based.
Right.
Yeah.
So close. And that's how Aklilu invited me to kind of sort of discuss our show, what we do, and so forth. And the reason I actually started working on our radio show was based out of an experience that I had in South Africa. I'm South African. I grew up in Cape Town, went to university in South Africa. I've worked and lived in different parts of the world, in London, in Dubai, New York, now in Austin and Cape Town. And I think just sort of a combination of all of those experiences, working in corporate for a really long time, and just in my travels, I've come across some very real situations where, it's great to throw a backpack on your back and just kind of travel, go hosteling around the world, but then you're also faced with some real dynamics of, this is how people are really living. It's as fun as it is to just kind of travel through these countries, but to actually really embrace yourself in the culture and see what the local communities are going through. And about 2 years ago, I did a trip to South Africa.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello. Pull a chair. Right.
I did a trip to South Africa, and I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the situation in Zimbabwe right now, which kind of borders South Africa. It's chaotic, it's pretty traumatic. There are a lot of refugees that are fleeing into the country, and Meganthu could probably speak a little bit more about that, having just recently been in South Africa. And really what was happening, I was down in Cape Town and just seeing these hundreds of refugees coming into the country, no resources because they weren't, and I'm not sure what the status is right now, but they weren't recognized as refugees, so no United Nations down there, no resources. It was a very dismal situation when I was down there in March of 2008. And I think that experience being down in Cape Town, just going to several of these refugees, not just from Zimbabwe, but from Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, just listening to their stories of, I wanted to know, how did you walk all that way from Zimbabwe, which is a far walk all the way down to the tip of Africa? How did you get from Zimbabwe into Cape Town? What's happened to your family? And I think a lot of people really just wanted to tell their story. They wanted their story to be heard. They wanted their story to be told. And I don't know if you've been to any of the refugee camps down there.
Well, we were in South Africa during one of the first outbreaks.
Yeah.
So.
So I mean, it's not a pleasant situation. It wasn't a pleasant situation at all when I was down there in 2008, 2 years ago, and it was really interesting because as I was speaking to so many of these refugees from all over Africa, telling me how they'd actually literally walked across the border, jumped on buses anyway just to leave those countries. There was one man in particular, one refugee from Zimbabwe, who grabbed onto me and. Not in a bad way, but in a very real way, and started asking me questions about myself. Where are you from? What do you do? And I said, I live in the US and I'm going back next week. And he literally grabbed me and said, do you have any idea what capacity you have when you go back to tell our stories in a way that we never ever will be able to do that? And I think that really just resonated with me because I never thought about it that way, that we do have access to so much that we don't even realize the capacity that we do have to create this positive change, to get people to network, to get this story out there in a way that this refugee has absolutely no way. And I think that thought process resonated with me, just, coming back home. And I started calling up refugee services in London, in DC, wanting to know what are you doing about the refugee situation in Zimbabwe. And it was very new at the time, and everyone was like, well, you kind of have to back off. We're working on it. It's a very volatile situation. A lot of Zimbabwean refugees are not getting asylum status. And I was not pushed back, but kind of put on hold for all. And I was very upset by the situation. It was very real for me. I think it's different when you're out in a refugee camp and you're seeing those stories firsthand, and it's a real situation. It's hard to kind of come back to your Starbucks lifestyle. And I do like Starbucks, for the record, but it's very hard to just sort of come back to that kind of lifestyle and pretend that experience hadn't occurred. And that kind of led me to speaking with refugee services around the world, flew to London, on the phone with DC, and really started writing about these issues, started blogging about it. And I did that for a couple of months. We started getting a lot of media attention around what we're doing, because the focus is really to connect volunteers with development projects around the world by highlighting individuals and organizations. And that kind of led into the start of our online radio show, our podcast, which we started doing our first podcast, I think September, October of last year, 2009. And we do them once a week. We update new podcasts every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock Central Time. And the real focus is to highlight individuals and organizations and, people just working on some really cool development projects around the world that are looking for volunteers, that are looking for people to assist them in their campaigning. And there's a huge opportunity in online volunteering that I had no idea of. Not everyone can jump on a plane to Accra in Ghana to do volunteer work.
Did you say assist them in their campaigning?
Right.
Assist them in what they're doing.
Right. In bringing exposure to what they're doing, there's a huge opportunity in online volunteering. Such as Nabir is a company that I interviewed recently. They're based in the Netherlands, and they have this really great website where they list different NGOs, nonprofits around the world, what they're looking for, and how people can assist them. So if you go on their website, that's nabir.com, great website, phenomenal portal. There's requests from entrepreneurs in Kenya that want to start their own businesses. How do they move forward in putting together a business plan? How do they approach investors? So you could actually go online and give them advice on how to do that. So that's volunteering. You're volunteering your services, you're volunteering your skill set. And a lot of people don't know they can do that because they're just not exposed to that kind of environment, that kind of website, that opportunity. So a lot of our podcasts focuses on, wow, this is really cool organization. They work with refugees from Somalia. They're helping these refugees that have just resettled in Austin, for example, in making handcrafts or making different clothing items and so forth. They want to sell it. If you're going to, buy the items and support a great cause. And so these are the people that we really want to highlight because they're going out of their way to really empower people to volunteer and work within these communities, and they're looking for help and they're looking for assistance. So a large part of our podcast focuses on highlighting volunteer opportunities and connecting people with those projects. And I'm actually not sure how familiar everyone is with podcasts. Okay.
How many of us?
How many people have listened to a podcast? Okay, so everyone's pretty familiar. They have
not.
I've listened to one of my dad's. He plays, my father plays podcasts, and I listen to it.
It's really interesting because you could
NPR.
you could listen to a podcast on your cell phone. You could be driving home in the traffic. You could listen to several podcasts. And some podcasts, some are 3 minutes, some are, our shows are 15 to 20 minutes. So you could listen to it while you're doing work, while you're at work, just kind of surfing the web and so forth. So you can multitask, but they are audio clips that are embedded in websites. And I host my shows through Blog Talk Radio, which is a really cool portal. You actually set up with a virtual radio show switchboard. And we sometimes do live shows. Sometimes, most of the times, they are pre-recorded. A lot of our guests are calling in from outside of the country to do the show. So it's